Hello, Exiles. Welcome to the video. I am a brand new content creator. This is my first build guide, and I really hope you enjoy. So let's get right into it. First of all, this is an Archmage build. I do recommend Sorceress. Gemming Legionnaire probably works, but Sorceress will be better. The stats you will want to focus on mainly are Intelligence, Mana, and Spirit. We will be using 4 casts on shocks. Two of our casts on shocks will be the bulk of our damage, and the rest will just be for fun and comfort. The only unique you truly need are Melting Maelstrom and Threaded Light. Threaded Light, which is extremely cheap and increases our spell damage based on our spirit. With the setup I currently have, 12% spell damage for 10 spirit with 370 spirit. This gives me 444% spell damage. Melting Maelstrom is absolutely necessary for this build. No matter how much mana regen you stack, you will never have enough. You cannot sustain your mana without this flask. However, with this flask, it just mana recovery becomes completely trivial. This line right here, recover all mana when used, means you recover 100% of your mana every time you click it instantly. So it is the best flask in the game, in my opinion, by far. And that means you can forego mana regeneration everywhere. I only have it on my uniques, which if I didn't have those uniques, it would be fine. I wouldn't need the mana regen from them. And I have 0 mana regen on my tree. So let's start with the gems. So the first gem I'm going to talk about is Spark. You could totally use Fireball or another spell if you prefer. I like Spark. You just turn your brain off. It shoots projectiles everywhere. Super comfy, super easy to use, and it's definitely powerful with Archmage. First support gem we have in there is Acceleration. Acceleration just makes your projectiles go faster. You kill them before they notice you. It's perfect. Then we have Fork. Fork support. You could be using Pierce support. They are pretty much equal in my opinion. I like Fork support a little better because it does more projectiles while mapping, which makes mapping just comfier. Then we have Conduction support. This is 100% more chance to shock. In Path of Exile, more is multiplicative. So if you had 100% increase, it would be less. Here it's just straight up double chance to shock. Perfect, since we need to shock to proc cast on shock. Next we have Curse and Currents. This just makes our shocks proc in AoE 50% of the time. Again, this will generate tons of energy for our cast on shock during mapping. Really comfortable to have. And lastly, I use Considered Casting, which does 40% more damage with spell hits, which means 40% more chance to shock. The less cast speed, that's too bad, but it doesn't really matter because as you can see, I have very, very low cast speed because we are not a cast speed build. The second gem we're going to talk about is Flame Wall. Flame Wall, I'm sure you've seen it before. You make a wall of fire, and projectiles that go through gain fire damage. The thing is, Archmage amplifies that fire damage as lightning damage. So Flame Wall actually adds a ton of lightning damage with our build, which increases our chance to shock on Spark again. So we're going to be using Fire Mastery and Spell Cascade. The only really necessary one is Fire Mastery. Spell Cascade is just nice to create more fire everywhere, but it's really not that necessary. And the reason why we're not using Fortress, I will show you on my passive tree after, but we have so much increased AoE for Residual Power and for a Flame Wall that you see what just happened here? We spawned inside the Flame Wall, which means if our boss is right here, the target we're trying to kill, well, it's not. It's only going to get the Flame Wall effect on the rebound, which is no good. We don't want to have to like cast our Firewall, then step back just to get the effect of it. We just want to cast it and get going. So without Fortress support, this always casts in front of you, no matter what. Much easier to deal with. And then you just, you start sparking. So next we have Soul Offering. In order to use Soul Offering, you will need a Rattling Scepter specifically. This will give you 2 skeletons to sacrifice for Soul Offering. Soul Offering adds a ton of more spell damage. We're going to be using this supports gem, which increases the buff effect, and Ablation, which also increases the buff effect. This line, supported skill sacrifice 10% of life on use, does not apply to any Chaos Inoculation build. You see how we have only one hit point? It does not reduce it by 15%. We're good. Then we will be using Persistence. And as you can see, my damage jumped to 37k from 23k just in one single click. It's really easy to use, and it's a huge damage multiplier. Again, more damage means multiplicative. So this will multiply with Sigil of Power. Yeah, let's look at Sigil of Power. I just have Magnified Effect and Arcane Tempo. Just comfortable. You don't need any support gems in your skeletons, but I still do, because why not? The first spirit gem we're going to talk about is Overwhelming Presence. This is not necessary to the build, but it does make it much more powerful. If you're only able to get 340 spirit, you can forget about it. But if you're able to get 370 spirit, you should definitely go for it. I have it at minimum level because I do not want to invest in strength. And at this level, with quality, the quality will increase the effect. So you want to put quality on basically every single gem. So with quality, this will basically grant me 23% more chance to shock. That's the translation. Now the first cast on shock is going to be for Ball Lightning. First of all, Ball Lightning, the two first cast on shocks they're not really for damage. They do definitely will murder all the trash mobs, but it's not really our damage source. So Ball Lightning, we have Scatter Shot support, which fires 2 extra projectiles whenever this procs, and Wild Shards. So Wild Shards does not stack with Scatter Shot, so it's either Scatter Shot or Wild Shards. So basically, we're going to be firing 2 additional projectiles, or 24% of the time, 8 additional projectiles. Then we have Deceleration support, which just makes Ball Lightning slower, which is better for this build. Next, we have the Lightning Warp cast on shock. These are basically the way I got to this build is I wanted to inflict shock ground because shock ground is such a good effect. Whenever an enemy is standing on shock ground, it's automatically shocked. Duration of the shocks don't matter, they're just shocked. And on top of it, Lightning Warp has 10% increased magnitude of shocks you inflict. So I have 2 Lightning Warps in there for 2 reasons. First of all, Ball Lightning requires 100 energy. A single Lightning Warp requires 50 energy, which means we would be casting Lightning Warp way too soon. We want to be casting Ball Lightning and then be casting Lightning Warp. Secondly, both Lightning Warps will actually cast whenever this casts on shock procs. So yeah, it will actually put 2 shock grounds on the floor, which actually stack. So as a Stormweaver, we can stack 2 shocks. The 50% less shock duration does not matter because it's just the duration of the shocked ground, which is always 6 seconds. Well, actually here it's 10 seconds. Yeah, 10 seconds. So you just automatically put 2 shock ground on the floor, which both apply and both override other shocks because they have more magnitude than other shocks. Perfect. First, then we have Overcharge. Support skills have 75% increased magnitudes of shocks inflicted. That's just perfect. And the less duration, again, does not apply. Lightning Exposure is very powerful. So Lightning Exposure reduces lightning resistance by 20%, but as a Stormweaver again, we double that effect. So Lightning Exposure actually reduces lightning resistance by 40%. And with this Strip Away support gem, it actually reduces lightning resistance by 52%. So this is our shock tech right here. This shock will always override other shocks. So it doesn't matter if you shock with Ball Lightning or Spark. Spark is, you want Spark to shock to generate cast on shock, but the Lightning Warps will override. the other shocks because they're just much more powerful shocks. Then we have Cast on Shock for Lightning Conduit. This is what I call my utility conduit. It has Electrocute support. Electrocution basically just is a 5-second stun. This, it's good to note that it actually takes bonus from where is it? Overwhelming presence, so you have 23% more chance to electrocute as well. And basically, you're just going to be electrocuting everything. When this procs, one single proc will electrocute most anything, including T4 bosses. The only one that doesn't get electrocuted instantly is Zesh, because he has some sort of resistance to CC, I guess. But as you'll see later in video, he just dies instantly anyways. It doesn't matter. I mean, he dies mid-animation. He doesn't have time to do a single ability. Then we have Shock Siphon. This is just for comfort. Again, while mapping, you recover energy shield when you kill a shock target. Lightning Conduit is this huge cone, and it'll kill everything in it, which will most likely be shocked, and recover all your energy shield. Inspiration support, just make it cost less mana. It's nice. Our last Cast on Shock is going to be another conduit, but this time it's what I call my damage conduit. It has Elemental Focus, Controlled Destruction. So with Controlled Destruction you can't crit, but it's still very powerful to have. I recommend it. And we have Execute, which just makes it do way more damage if they're on low life. Once you get enough damage, it really doesn't matter, but I just left it in there anyways. And if you're wondering why I don't have Considered Casting in there, well, with the new patch, Considered Casting does not work on trigger skills. It says specifically, and you cast yourself, and if you put the gem in your conduit, you'll see right here, conduit 22.4K. If I put Considered Casting, the damage did not change. If I remove any other gem, the damage changes. Because Considered Casting just does not work on trigger spells anymore. It was just too powerful and they decided to change it. And so the last Spirit Gem is going to be Archmage, of course. Without Archmage, you're not an Archmage. And so yeah, you just put Lightning Mastery in there and you're good to go. So that's about it for the gems. I guess, yeah, that's about it for the gems. So let's talk about the talent tree next. Yeah, so let's look at this passive skill tree. So for the Ascendancy, typical Stormweaver, Arcane Surge, percent increased mana, 2 shocks, and 2 exposures, or double exposure power, rather. That's standard. Pretty much all Stormweavers have this. Then for you new players or you broke players, you're going to have a very different tree than this, and I will be posting it in Mobalytics. I will also be posting the high-end version in Mobalytics on a different link. There's this version is very expensive. It looks all funky like this because it is a the adorned jewel stacking build, which for endgame is almost 100% of the time better for any build, pretty much. Jewels are extremely powerful. They're most of the time, they are just better than regular passive nodes, especially when you're trying to stack a single stat. So what the Adorn does, for you players who have never seen it, basically you need corrupted magic jewels. Every corrupted magic jewel gains 68% in my case, increased effect. So it has to be corrupted and it has to be blue. It cannot be rare. Which is why all my jewels will look like this. So the most important part, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 points that you need that are just crucial, no matter how you build this build. Mind over matter. All damage is taken from mana before life. Eldritch Battery converts all energy shield to mana, makes your mana much higher. Pure Power, increase lightning damage per 10 intelligence, crucial. Arcane Intensity, increase spell damage per 100 mana. All of those 2 points will scale your damage tremendously. And lastly, Chaos Inoculation, makes you immune to chaos damage. Without this, you will kill yourself with this potion. As you can see, deals 25% of current mana as chaos damage to you when effect ends. if you're spamming this pot, you're in trouble if you don't have Chaos Inoculation. Chaos Inoculation just makes you immune to Chaos, so it doesn't matter how much Chaos Resist you have. You don't need any Chaos Resist. It does 0 to you. Which, on a side note, a lot of very strong abilities and annoying abilities are Chaos, so this just makes you, you know, you just stand right in it and don't care. For points that are nice but not absolutely necessary, we have Eternal Youth. This makes it so you can heal your energy shield with potions, but with the downside of energy shield does not recharge. But the thing is, energy shield can only recharge when you haven't taken damage in the past 8 seconds. So if you're taking scratch damage every 2 seconds, you'll never ever recharge energy shield. Whereas here, we can use potions on our energy shield and like spam him when we're in trouble. And this doesn't care if we're taking damage or not. It just refills our energy shield. So this point is quite nice to have. Second is Wildstorm. Wildstorm, more maximum damage, multiplicative again, with the fact that lightning damage has such small minimum damage and such high maximum damage, it is a huge damage boost. Wildstorm. For your Amulet Anoint, I went the cheap version, which is Mana Blessing, which is nice, but what's best is by far Lightning Rod. So, non-critical hits with lightning damage is lucky. What does lucky mean? Let's look it up. Lucky things are rolled twice and the better result is used. What does it mean? It means that when you're rolling between minimum and maximum damage, it'll roll twice and take the higher number. Because our minimum and maximum have such a big gap, this is a huge damage boost. On average, if you want to do the rough math in your head without, pulling out the Excel sheet, you can just say that your damage is equal to 50% of your maximum damage for lightning. So average damage is 110, let's say, for Spark. But with lucky hits, you would actually have 75% of your maximum damage as average damage. So in this case, like 160 or whatever. But yeah, it increases your average damage by basically 50% on lightning. It is humongous. The only problem with this lightning rod anoint is it costs 2 isolation, distilled isolation, which are extremely expensive. Suffering is also expensive. So it's the one of the most expensive anoints you can put on your necklace, but it is a massive damage increase. Just so you guys know, even without this, I am two-shotting every boss. T4 bosses just doesn't matter. But, I mean, if you're min-maxing, take this, for sure. And so for the rest of the build, so let's talk about energy gain modifier. You're going to need exactly 275% energy gain modifier if you're on high budget. If you're on low budget, you will need exactly 150% energy gain modifier. So what does this mean? Let me explain it to you the simplest I can. At 150% energy gain modifier, you will generate exactly 100 energy per shock on unique bosses, which means that it will take you 3 shocks to apply all your casts on shocks. At 275% energy gain modifier, you will generate exactly 150 maximum energy, 150 energy per shock. So you will need exactly 2 shocks per unique bosses to proc all your casts on shocks. So it's again 50% more damage multiplier from 3 to 2, or yeah, like 33% more damage multiplier, I guess. But it is a big boost. The thing is, between 150 and 275% energy gain modifier, it doesn't change anything. You have to reach certain breakpoints. So either 150 or 275. Anything in between is useless. Above 275 is useless. You would need to get somewhere like 550 or more percent energy gain modifier to proc all your casts on shocks on every shock, which is, you can't reach that unless you're sacrificing a huge amount of power, which makes no sense. So 275% is the ultimate sweet spot. If you're poor, just go for 150%. Doesn't matter how you reach it, okay? So you have my build here. I'm using those skills. If you can't reach it with jewels, you can get some of those skills. And for me, I'm stacking exactly 7 jewels with 15% increased meta energy, and that gives me exactly 275% with those 4 points here. So yeah, it doesn't matter how you get there. Everybody's going to get there in different ways depending on their budget. But what you have to remember is that between 150 and 275, it makes no difference. You have to reach those breakpoints. From 0 to 175 also makes no difference. So, I mean, from 0 to 150. So 150% for low budget, 275% for high budget. It's very hard to reach 275% without the Adorned. Just a heads up. On every jewel that is not meta energy, you're going to be wanting to stack chance to inflict either ailments or shock. They are the same. And increased magnitude of shock or ailments. Also the same. The only difference is that if you have a chance to inflict ailment, it's always going to have a lower roll than chance to inflict shock. And increased magnitude of shock is always going to have a higher roll than increased magnitude of ailment. But ailment also applies to electrocute. So they're both good. Don't worry too much about it when you're starting out. Just get a lot of those jewels. As you can see, I'm stacking them. And this is how you reach 100% effect of shock. Grab shock magnitude whenever it's there. Frazzled is a very big point. Unbound forces is another very big point. And it allows you to get some penetration, which is, with the 52% penetration thanks to exposure, you're basically capped with just those 2 penetration points. It's really, really good, this little node here, this little cluster. Now, talk about Sigil of Power. So Sigil of Power is on my second weapon set. You will need a chiming staff. The only stat that really matters is cast speed, but it doesn't really matter anyways. You can just go without it. However, you will want to get 20% quality. The quality will increase the size of your Sigil of Power by quite a bit. And so once you have this quality, you assign Sigil of Power and Flame Wall to your second weapon set. And for the second weapon set points, we'll take everything into skill effect duration and AoE. This will make him last very long and be very big. As you can see, my Sigil of Power currently has duration of 21 seconds. It's just nice. And for the 2 extra points, if you have extra points, depends how you path on your tree again, I just put a little bit more cast speed. So yeah, this will make it very comfy. You don't need to cast it often. You can just cast it once during boss fights and you have it. Yeah, so now, let's see. Did I forget anything? No, I think that's it. You can check the mobilytics if you need more info. But the things to remember is that you need Chaos Inoculation, Eldritch Battery, Arcane Intensity, Pure Power, and Mind Over Matter. These are the crucial 5 points. You cannot play this build without them. Secondly, you will need to reach either 150% or 275% energy gain modifier. And thirdly, just stack as much magnitude of shock as possible. If you are doing low damage, wait, doing too much damage here. Let's wait for this to wear off. If your spark DPS is too low, oops. So imagine you're doing 10,000 spark DPS, but you get 100% increased chance to shock. You will have as much chance to shock as I do, because chance to shock is basically based off your damage versus enemy hit points. So 10,000 spark damage with 100% increased chance to shock is the same as just 20,000 spark damage, for example. So if you have very low spark damage, you will want to put some points in chance to shock. Some of them are very easily accessible, like the ones I'm showing here. And those points here are very nice because they lead to increased magnitude. So there's plenty of ways to get this build rolling without the jewels, without too many jewels. don't worry, you don't have to spend too much divines to get this rolling. But on another note, you can spend 300 or more divines on this build to reach insane ceilings. Ideal, when everything's set up on a boss, I will do 12 million damage bursts. But the thing is, they just are always dead before it, so it's very rare for me to be able to do a 12 million damage burst on a boss. But it does happen sometimes. Okay, so next let's talk about the items. This will make everything come together. Okay, so now let's talk about the items. I'm going to be showing every one of my items and explaining what's necessary and what's not, and what you basically need on every piece. So, first of all, like I said before, we have Melting Maelstrom. This is absolutely crucial for this build. This is the only piece that you cannot replace pretty much. This and Threaded Light. But Threaded Light is dirt cheap, so it's not a problem. This one might cost you 25 divines though. Maybe the price raises, lowers, but it's a little bit expensive. Secondly, Life Pot. If you don't have Ingenuity or a Utility Belt, you probably want the mod with 20% or 30% of amount is recovered instantly. This just makes it safer. But any good life pot will work. The unique life pot is definitely best in slot for this, as it gives you ward. It's probably my next purchase. Yeah, so that's it for the potions. Then we have, like I said, Threaded Light. Just get yourself a 12% increased spell damage per 10 spirit. And if you like this build, go for a 15%. Then we have Everlasting Gaze. This basically gives us energy shield, even though we have Eldritch Battery allocated. So this converts all energy shield to mana, and with Everlasting Gaze, it converts, well, it actually adds 30% of your mana as extra maximum energy shield. So what happens is your energy shield is converted to mana, and 30% of your mana is back to energy shield without subtracting any mana. This is really good. Gives you an extra little line of defense, because when you are in maps, your mana will drop to zero constantly. It'll go up and down, up and down, and up and down with this flask. And so having just a little bit of buffer just makes it much safer. And so on this Everlasting Gaze, if you're broke, I suggest anointing. Where is it? Here it is. Hunter's Talisman. This is a cheap anoint. 3 times Paranoia. This gives you 1 extra charm slot. The reason why this is so nice is because with Chaos Inoculation, we only have 1 life. Stuns and freeze are the chance to stun you and the chance to freeze you is basically based off how much life you have. Unless you're heavily investing like an Icebreaker, which converts basically your freeze threshold to energy shield instead of life. Well, it's actually additional, but since you have 1, it's instead. So you would have to invest a lot of points everywhere just to be able to not get frozen and not get stunned. And in the end, you still will get frozen and stunned. So what I like to do is have +1 charm slot if you're broke again, so that you can put a stone charm and the thawing charm, the anti-freeze charm. Where is it? One of those. So you can have both of those and you're immune to freeze and stun basically all the time. You have enough charges when you're mapping. It'll make you completely immune to both. So if you are a little richer and you're able to get dream fragments, this makes you immune to chill and freeze, which means you don't need the second charm slot. You can just have the anti-stun charm. Dream fragment is extremely powerful for this build, but it is also extremely expensive. The increased maximum mana gets amplified by Ingenuity, which gives you about 44% more increased mana. Here, I'm gaining basically 1500 mana just from this ring. Very powerful. For rings, what you're focusing on is mana, intelligence. That's what matters. Everything else is bonus. You obviously want to reach maximum elemental resistances. Having a little bit more is always better, so that when you get cursed with elemental weakness, you're still capped. But basically, it doesn't matter how you get maximum resistances, you just need maximum resistances. So mana, intelligence, and energy shield are the most important stats on all your piece of gear. Like here, I have these gloves, they're not very good, but they help me cap my resistances. I do the same with my boots, just have massive resist boots. You get mana wherever you can, and as much energy shield wherever you can. The If I had mana soul core in here, it would probably be better, honestly, and I should do that. For your helm, you're gonna want to get as see this helm is not very good for my build. I mean, it's obviously good, but there is much better. You could have the same amount of energy shield, but instead of life, you could have mana here. This would make this a huge helmet. But the main thing is you want to kind of get this is really, really important, getting spirit on your helmet. So I got 29. You're gonna basically want to match it with your armor to reach either 340 or 370 spirit. So spirit on your helm as a corruption, extremely important. Spirit on your chest as a roll, extremely important. And the more the better. This armor is obviously very good. You want intelligence on the suffix for this armor. This will add a lot of damage and mana. You want as high energy shield as possible, and you want some spirit. That's for the chest armor. For the helm, you want as high energy shield as possible, some mana instead, if possible, and spirit as high as possible. For your scepter, you're going to want a rattling scepter. These are basically the exact stats you want. You don't need the minions have increased maximum life. That's nice, but that's not necessary. What's necessary is 30 strength and some int, some increased spirit, and some mana. Most of your spirit will come from your scepter. Quality on a scepter will increase the total amount of spirit by its multiplicative. So whatever spirit you have, you can multiply it by 1.2 to know exactly how much it'll have with quality. So mana, spirit percentage, strength, and int. The reason why you want strength is this. So you see if I remove my scepter, I can't even equip it anymore. So where is it? I have some belt somewhere. Here. Once I equip this belt, I'm able to equip it, and because it already has strength, it stays on. Even if I switch weapons, it's fine. Now it's on and the strength applies, which means I don't need to invest in strength. Very important. Do not make the mistake of getting reduced attributes requirements. The reason why is even though you'll be able to wear it with less attribute requirements, you won't be able to use your skeletons anymore, as they also require some strength. Which is why 30 strength is what you want. If you can get 30 int and 180 mana, that's better. These go to like way more spirit than mine. You can get like 20% spirit corruption, I think, and they can go to 80% spirit roll, which means, you know, way more spirit than what this one has, which would mean way more damage because of threaded light. So this is I think I spent 2 divines on this. Basically nothing, considering the power I get from it. It doesn't matter how much spirit things have as long as you reach 330 or 370, like I was saying before. Wait, what's going on? There we go. That was weird. Okay, so yeah, 370 spirit if you want to be able to use overwhelming presence, 340 if you just want to bypass it if you're going for a cheaper version. Yeah, for the belt, ingenuity is obviously top class, but if you can't afford it, just go for some resist and some mana. Double or triple resist and mana, double or triple resist and mana on rings, and like this you can cap your elemental resist while still getting good mana. Ingenuity is obviously better, but you don't have to get it. Movement speed on boots is always good, but you don't need to get 30% because we're going to be warping everywhere. So it's basically like to walk to your loot. That's what the 20% movement speed is. Or if there's like, you know, a gap in a map where there's no mobs, you clearly just have to walk. We're not using temporalis or blink, so we're walking places unless we're warping to enemies. Two. All right, so let's do this map here. It's not very hard, but still T16. We're running Hive. Let's go. This should give you a good idea of how this build runs on regular maps. It's not really juice, it's just a random map. So the way you play while mapping, you don't really use Sigil of Power, Flame Wall, or Soul Offering. This is just for bosses. You just basically just cast Spark, and everything happens on its own. So let's hope this map has good density so you guys can see warp action. The higher the density, the harder the map, the better the building, which is really nice. So here is a ritual. I like putting a sigil, because why not? Yeah, there's like no mobs. So the reason why the enemies are all blurry like this is overwhelming presence. That's the effect it has on it. So it's not like bad graphics or something. It's just that everything looks blurry.
There is power in this object.
Because of overwhelming presence. Can't wait for them to release some new MTX for it, because I really don't like that effect. Rather, you know, if I could buy a skin for it or something, it would be nice. The more open the map is, the better this build is. Oh man, can't go through here. Very good for breaching. Just get warped everywhere, have no control over where you're going, but what's nice is it always warps you to enemies. Yeah, you don't really have to think about it, you're just warping. Let the build do the walking for you. Yeah, this build has, this map has very low density for some reason. Oh, there we go. But if you want to really see this build in action, I do have a montage that I will be linking at the end of the video. So yeah, this is how it goes in all the maps. I'm pretty sure you see how it works by now. You don't really need more. I'll just do this ritual, and then I'll put a link to the montage. The montage is pretty cool. You guys should watch it. Alright, well, thanks for watching everybody, and I hope I see you around.